Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, lawmakers rush to pass dozens of bills at the final plenary meeting of the annual regular session as the ruling party submits a motion to expel 2 opposition lawmakers for their recent remarks about the president. On the second day of the Co-Rail strike, the state-run railway operator removes additional union members from their posts and approves an affiliate to manage a high-speed train service in southern Seoul, now the centre of the labour management dispute. Plus, stressing the importance of maintaining strong economic relations with Russia, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovich seems to be making a compromise by hinting at a possible signing of an association deal with the EU. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Wednesday, December 11th. I'm Choi in Seoul. Let's start things off at the National Assembly, where dozens of bills were finally passed on the last day of the annual regular session. This comes despite unrelenting tension between the rival parties. Our Park Ji-won has more.
The National Assembly passed 37 bills on its very last plenary meeting of the annual regular session. The bills include several related to boosting the nation's real estate market and several others that aim to bring about the vision of cultural enrichment, one of key national goals set by President Park Geun-hye. Those include a basic law on culture and a revised copyright law. Revised bills on the sustainable development of Dokdo and the management of livestock products also passed the Assembly. Remaining bills will be dealt with at the legislature's provisional sessions beginning this Wednesday until January 3rd next year. Today's passing of 37 bills was possible as the floor leaders of both parties met and agreed on Tuesday afternoon to go ahead with parliamentary schedules as planned despite a disruption earlier in the day. The Budget Settlement Committee and a special committee set up to reform the nation's spy agency were supposed to meet Tuesday morning. But one meeting was cut short, while the other was cancelled over remarks by 2 Democratic Party lawmakers against President Park Geun-hye. DP lawmaker Jang Ha-na, referring to allegations that the National Intelligence Service meddled in last year's presidential election, called the election a fraud. She demanded that President Park step down and called for a fresh election. Another DP lawmaker, Yang Seung-jo, said that should President Park refuse to listen to the people, she could meet the same fate as her father, the late President Park Chung-hee, who was assassinated. The National Assembly has been deadlocked for the vast majority of its 100-day regular session that started at the beginning of September. Not a single bill had been passed before the 37 gained approval on Tuesday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And the ruling Saenuri Party has filed a motion at the Assembly's Disciplinary Committee to expel the 2 DP lawmakers Jang Ha-na and Yang Seung-jo from Parliament. The motion, signed by all 155 ruling Conservative Party members, strongly condemns their remarks, saying they agitated the constitutional order of the country and impair the honor and authority of the National Assembly. The Democratic Party expressed regrets over the ruling party's action, saying the motion was based on partisan interests. It added the remarks did not warrant being kicked out of the National Assembly. The South Korean military will build 3 more Aegis destroyers to better deter North Korean threats and enhance its defense capabilities against rising tensions in Northeast Asia. The plan was approved at Tuesday's Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting. Some $3.8 billion will be spent adding 3 more destroyers, which will be deployed by mid-2020. The new destroyers will be equipped with much more advanced detection and striking systems, and officials say by increasing the total number of destroyers to 6, the Navy can form a separate fleet exclusively for the Dokdo-Eodo areas. Japan has long tried to claim Korea's Dokdo Islets, while the Eodo Reef is under the air zones of Korea, China, and Japan. After removing 4,000 striking workers from their posts, Korea's state-run rail operator on Tuesday did the same to an additional 1,500 workers for continuing a strike over a suspected privatization plan. Despite the battle put up by its union, Korail went ahead and approved a plan to establish a new affiliate. Our Son Jung-in has the details.
The conflict between the nation's railway corporation and its labor union is not expected to subside anytime soon, with the management's decision Tuesday evening to dismiss an additional 1,500 railway union workers from their posts, following a removal of more than 4,000 on Monday. Members of Korea Railway Board meeting have approved a set of a subsidiary firm to operate KTX trains connecting southern Seoul to the central and southern provinces of Chungcheongdo and Jeollado by 2016. Union members of the train operators staged protests outside the Korail building as the board meeting was being held. In response to the strike, Korail has asked the police to investigate illegal labor actions and the obstruction of working environments. Unionized workers say Korail's KTX plans could result in mass layoffs and fare hikes, but the company denies the claim, saying the new unit will be 41% and 59% owned by Korail and state-run investors respectively, and that private firms will never be allowed to buy stakes in it. The government says the union's argument holds no ground and blamed the union workers for escalating a labor dispute that has disrupted some train services. However, public inconvenience is expected to worsen as the labor union for Seoul subway lines 1 through 4 has vowed to go on strike next Wednesday to join the rail workers. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
With Korea's energy consumption expected to double by the year 2035, there have been questions on whether the country will increase its nuclear energy reliance, reduce it, or leave it as it is. Our Kwon So-ah reports on the government's plan for the nation's nuclear future.
Korea, the world's fifth largest producer of nuclear electricity, will be even more reliant on nuclear energy in the future. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday released its nuclear power energy plan for 2035 to the National Assembly, and it shows a growing dependence on nuclear energy. Currently, Korea's reliance on nuclear power stands at 26%, with 23 plants that are either operating or undergoing maintenance. The government's plan is to increase that reliance to 29% in the year 2035, which would require a total of between 40 and 42 nuclear power plants. 11 plants are already under construction or in the planning stages, meaning 5 to 6 more on top of that total will have to be built. A working group made up of citizens, industries, and educational bodies recently suggested a nuclear energy reliance range of between 22 and 29%, taking public acceptance into consideration. The government's 29% rate is on the high side of that scale, but far less than the aim set forth by the government under former President Lee Myung-bak. It had set up a 41% aim. There have been concerns about the continuous construction of nuclear power plants in the country at a time when other nations are retreating from nuclear power. Germany, for example, is planning to close down all plants in its country. Meanwhile, there also have been issues concerning failed quality tests of nuclear reactors and corruption in the sector. However, the government says that due to the country's industry structure, nuclear power is a cheap and efficient source of energy. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Despite lingering economic uncertainty at home and abroad, Korea has continued to ramp up spending on research and development. Data from the Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning shows the nation's R&D spending stood at around $52 billion last year, up more than 10% from a year earlier. When the nation's R&D spending was converted by the currency rate adopted by the OECD, the amount was the world's sixth largest. Korea's ratio of spending on R&D to gross domestic product was second only to Israel at 4.3%. On the trade front, Korea's information and communication technology trade balance reached a new record high in November on rising demand from China and Southeast Asia. The Trade Ministry says the cumulative surplus from the first 11 months of this year reached nearly $82 billion, breaking the record set back in 2010. Outbound shipments of semiconductors contributed the most to the surplus. Smartphones boosted by sales of Samsung's Galaxy Note 3 and Galaxy S4 also provided a bump. Good news for Japan's tourism industry, yet not so much for Korea's. The strong local currency is prompting more Koreans to travel abroad, particularly to Japan, whose currency has been on the decline. Yet at the same time, the exchange rate has been driving Japanese tourists away from Korea. Arirang has the details.
Currency fluctuations are making Koreans travel in droves to Japan. With the Korean won hovering at the highest level in more than 2 years against the dollar, and the Japanese yen losing its value by more than a fifth since Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office last year, Koreans feel things are much cheaper in Japan these days. Hana Tour, the country's biggest travel agency, said the number of Koreans who made hotel reservations in Japan through the company nearly doubled this year, after a jump of nearly 60% last year. On the flip side, the number of Japanese tourists arriving in Korea shrank by nearly a quarter in the January to October period from the same period last year. In contrast to benefits Korean travelers are enjoying, exporters say they are feeling the pinch from the won's strength. Exports make up about half of Korea's GDP, but local products have been losing price competitiveness overseas, especially against Japanese goods. The head of the Korea International Trade Association, Han Deok-soo, has recently said Korean companies will face an uphill battle in export markets in the coming year if their Japanese rivals aggressively market their products, taking advantage of a weak yen. The government has estimated that Korea's exports will drop by 1.9% every time the yen loses its value against the won by 10%. Yurian, Arirang News.
Debt owned by Korea's public organizations stood at some $500 billion as of the end of last year, almost $45 billion more than the national debt and nearly double the total from 2007. 12 public organizations, including the Korea Land and Housing Corporation and Korea Electric Power Corporation in particular, saw their combined debt expand by more than $210 billion from 2007, making up over 80% of the overall debt of public organizations. Korea's finance minister says the heads of public organizations will be held accountable for debt problems even after their terms end. More plans will be announced later this week. The Korean government has decided to ease regulations on the nation's broadcasting industry to promote competition and provide a wider range of options for the people. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning says that cable television operators will now be allowed to broadcast high-definition TV programs. The nation's terrestrial broadcasting companies will also be allowed to air various programs at the same time on their one channel using a new technology. The government expects the plans to create 10,000 jobs and $5.7 billion in revenue.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. In an attempt to contain the widening civil unrest in his country, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovich has vowed to release some of the demonstrators arrested during a wave of massive protests in Kiev. The president also talked about renewing talks with the European Union on a much-anticipated trade and political agreement, but also stressed the importance of maintaining strong economic ties with Russia. Yanukovych's refusal to sign a deal opposed by Russia last month sparked the protests. After meeting with 3 of his predecessors on Tuesday, Yanukovych said he would sign the deal once he reaches a compromise with the EU that satisfies Ukraine. A snowstorm in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States shut schools and federal offices in the country's capital and elsewhere along the eastern seaboard on Tuesday. 25 centimeters of snow piled up in some areas after a wave of heavy snowfall swept through the nation over the weekend. Federal government offices were shut and school districts in Washington and Maryland also called off classes due to dangerous road conditions. About 1,000 flights were also canceled nationwide. The world gathered in Johannesburg on Tuesday to pay homage to Nelson Mandela in a mass memorial service. Tens of thousands of people, including some of the world's most prominent figures, were present for the ceremony. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
We join together in sorrow for a mighty loss and in celebration of a mighty life. What a wondrous display of this rainbow nation.
Some 95,000 mourners, including dozens of presidents and prime ministers and celebrities, descended upon Johannesburg Tuesday to say goodbye to late South African President Nelson Mandela. The public memorial service was held at First National Bank Stadium, where Mandela gave his first speech after being released from prison. Despite being a memorial service and despite the rainy conditions, the mood at the stadium was both joyous and festive. Thousands of people came together, mirroring the global message of reconciliation. Several leaders and Mandela's relatives gave speeches praising Mandela's achievements and his life.
It is hard to eulogize any man. How much harder to do so for a giant of history who moved a nation toward justice.
Following Tuesday's memorial, Mandela's body will lie in state at the Union Buildings in Pretoria for 3 days so citizens can pay their respects. He will then be buried on Sunday in his ancestral village of Cuneo in the Eastern Cape. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
December 10th was Human Rights Day, a day to commemorate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights signed in 1948. It's also a day to raise awareness of the human rights abuses taking place around the world. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 10, 1948, marks its 65th anniversary on Tuesday. The declaration arose from the atrocities carried out during the Second World War and was the first global acknowledgement of human rights. But there are a handful of countries still abusing these basic rights and conducting gruesome acts, North Korea being high on the list. There is no freedom of speech in North Korea, and all news in the country is strictly controlled by the government. Experts say there are nearly 200,000 political prisoners detained in concentration camps, where they are subject to forced labor, torture, and execution. The regime, despite constant pressure from international human rights organizations, shows no sign of change. The UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution condemning North Korea's human rights record ever since 2003. Earlier this year, the UN Human Rights Council established a commission of inquiry to look into the human rights abuses in the North. They are expected to submit their findings to the Council in March of next year. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with Tuesday's KBO Golden Glove Awards. Now, a lot of the winners this year weren't so surprising, including Kang Min-ho of the Lotte Giants, who won the catcher's category, and Park Byung-ho, who received over 96% of the vote. But for a couple of LG Twins players, it was a day to remember. Now, first off, over on the designated hitter category, Lee Byung-gyu becomes the oldest winner at 38 years, 6 months, and 15 days as he wins his 6th Golden Glove Award. Now, despite his age, he's been one of the best hitters in the league. Meanwhile, Park Yong-taek, the center fielder for the LG Twins, won the outfielder category as he got very emotional up on stage after winning his 3rd Golden Glove Award. And staying in domestic baseball, a day after becoming the highest paid manager in the KBO, Samsung Lions manager Yu Jung-il was named the head coach of the 2014 Asian Games team on Tuesday. Now, the Samsung manager, who has 3 Korean Series titles in his resume, will be leading the Asian Games team during the 2014 Incheon Asian Games, with hopes that it'll be a better stint than his WBC head coach days earlier this year. Now, the KBO agreed to make the manager of the championship team to lead the international team instead of appointing a separate manager. Now, another voting results were out, and this time it was over in the Korean Basketball League, where the 2013 KBL All-Star ballot results were revealed. And once again, it was Ulsan Mobis Phoebus point guard Yang Dong-gun who received the most votes this year after getting 46,885 votes. It's the second time in 3 years that the point guard received the most All-Star votes. Meanwhile, the second and third most All-Star votes went to 2 rookies this season, Kim Min-gu of Jeonju KCC Aegis and Kim Jong-gyu of Changwon LG Sakers, have been seeing a great success in their first year in the league. Now, the All-Star game will take place on December 22nd in Seoul. And staying in the KBL, we had one game take place last night, so let's take a look at the highlights between the Seoul Samsung Thunders and the Incheon Itilan Elephants. Now, going into the game first quarter of the game, Incheon doing a good job spreading the ball around to take a 25-20 lead before heading into halftime with a 42-37 lead. Second half of the game, Jasper Johnson putting up 17 points just in the second half, while Ricardo Powell scores 13 points in the fourth quarter. But with game tied 76-76, Incheon's Cha Ba-wi with the buzzer beater as Incheon takes this game 78-76. All right, finishing things off with some Tuesday night's V-League action. The Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs took on Russian Cash Vespid. So let's take a look at the highlights from Daejeon. Of course, going into the game, surprisingly, a close game all around as Russian Cash manages to keep up with Samsung's offense from the get-go. But Samsung still manages to take the first 2 sets, 25-22 and 25-23. By the third set, Arpan Baroti leading the way for the Vespid as Russian Cash forced a 4th set, 27-25. However, that looked to be all for the expansion team as Samsung dominates the 4th set, 25-14, as they take this game 3-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, it's a snowy day today, and we'll see snow showers and freezing drizzle early in the morning in most parts of the nation. So weather will be dropping to much cooler temperatures, and the afternoon highs in Seoul will only hike up to 1 in the afternoon. Well, not only cold, this is coming with strong gusty winds, and the heavy snow advisory is in place in parts of Gyeonggi-do and Ganghwa in Incheon, and surrounding areas are also receiving heavy snowfall at the moment, so heavy snow advisory could be expanded to other areas, including here in the capital. Well, now we are expecting 2 to 5 centimeters of snow in the central region and less than 1 centimeters of snowfall down south, and that means the roads are extremely slippery, so slow down on the roads. But you know, it's best to take public transportation today. And these AM showers, or snow showers that is, should gradually let up before noon. Now, looking ahead, the coldest day of the season is headed our way. The mercury levels will drop each day and daily lows will fall into -7 on Friday, and it looks like cold weather should continue till Memorial Day weekend. But now, here are the readings for today. The morning low in Seoul is starting out at -2, but afternoon highs will peak to 1, while Gwangju and Daegu will soar to 5, and Busan should climb into 8. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will also stay below 10 as highs reaching to 9 in the afternoon. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 4 and 6 respectively, while freezing days in store for Mount Kumgang getting up to -7. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday.
And that's it for this Wednesday edition of Daybreak. Thank you for watching.